So I wanted to talk about the symbols. I wanted to analyse the symbols in the film. And so to me, there were two symbols that really stuck out to me. And that was the symbol of music and the symbol of books. So I'll start with the symbol of music in the film. So I feel like the music, it represents freedom, resistance, freedom of expression, and autonomy. So we have the scene in which Andy turns up the opera music, and not only is he listening to it himself, but he's also putting it up to the speaker to project it out to all the other prisoners to allow them to hear it as well. That humanizes them because there's that really beautiful scene where all of the prisoners are still and they're mesmerized, and the camera pans around and we just see that they're totally absorbed in this beautiful music. And Red says even though they don't understand what the singers are saying, they still understand their emotions in the music as well.
I tell you, those voices soared higher and farther than anybody in a great place dares to dream. It was like some beautiful bird flapped into our drab little cage and made those walls dissolve away. And for the briefest of moments, every last man at Shawshank felt free.
I think that that's also subverting this idea of prisoners being, two-dimensional. It adds another layer of depth to the prisoners in that they are people who appreciate high art when they're given the chance to listen to it. And interestingly as well, Red tells Andy that he stopped playing the harmonica and when he came into the prison because there was no need for it. And then Andy significantly gives him the harmonica.
Wow. I played a mean harmonica as a younger man. Lost interest in it, though. Didn't make much sense in here.
And then the parole meeting after that is where he truly expresses himself to the jury, or what would you call it? The parole board, yeah. So like the previous two instances where Red faced the parole board, he repeated the exact same dialogue, and his attempts were extremely futile. And the reason why he's just repeating the same thing is because he doesn't have any hope that he will his appeal will get accepted. But then after he's given the harmonica and after he learns from Andy that hope is not necessarily a dangerous thing, then that is when he confronts the parole board, and he has more power in that scene than he did in the previous scenes, where he's like quite monotone in the previous parole board scenes, but in that scene he's quite emphatic. The dialogue is quite like expressive and emphatic in the final parole board scene.
Here's where it makes the most sense. You need it so you don't forget.
Forget?
Yeah, forget that there are places in the world that aren't made out of stone, that there's something inside that they can't get to, that they can't touch. It's yours.
What are you talking about?
Hope.
I think the key word that, for me, that you said was that autonomy,
yes.
That they regain autonomy. And when you're creating something, you're autonomous. You're the only one, creating the music or creating the art or creating the, imagination or your own hope, creating that.
Yeah.
He takes back that autonomy and he speaks, freely, as you said. And I think that was, that's interesting point, though.
Yeah, I think as well, creating is if you look at like Bloom's taxonomy, it's like something that is a high, like a skill to like create
a high need.
art. Yeah.
And art in itself is one of the reasons why it is considered like timeless, is because it's always seems to be at some form an act of rebellion. It could be like music, even like simple rock music at the time
can be a protest song.
Was a protest song, yeah. And today it's like, it could be seen as tame, and then we've moved on to other genres. But in itself is an act of expression. And when someone gives their feelings and their vulnerability, it humanizes people. It allows people to actually connect, and it's one of the reasons why music is one of the first things, and why education and books and going into someone else's thoughts, I mean, even the fact that there's narration in the film, are all symbols of this freedom. Like, you can't take, funnily enough, Morgan Freeman plays Nelson Mandela in Invictus, and Nelson Mandela says that, you could take my body, you could take my clothes, you could take everything from me, but the one thing you can never take from me is my mind.
I love that you've just said that, because that is what I was about to say next. And it's when Andy gets released out of the being in the hole for 2 weeks, and they said, how did you deal with it? And he said, it was like easy, because I had the music in here and I had it in here. And he points to his head and his heart, and he said, that's the beauty of music. They can't get that from you.
That's right. A week in the hole is like a year. Damn straight.
I have Mr. Mozart to keep me company.
So they let you tote that record player down there, huh?
It's in here. In here. That's the beauty of music. They can't get that from you. Haven't you ever felt that way about music?
And when I listened to that dialogue, I was actually reminded of 1984, when the protagonist says, there's something, nothing was your own except the few cubic centimeters inside your skull. And like the act of like thinking is very rebellious. And, so long as you can have your own thoughts, you can maintain some sort of semblance of power. And, Andy said, there's something, it kind of sort of mirrors, like Andy says, there's something inside you that they can't get to, that they can't touch, hope. And it's the same with the music, like they can't get to his head and his heart. And that scene really like cements that idea for me. And I think I want to talk about another symbol as well that occurs in the film, and that is the symbol of books. And also art. So first of all, with art, we have these posters that are around Andy's prison cell. Again, they're all a method of self-expression. And he actually has a poster of Albert Einstein on there as well, which gives us an idea that he, values education and values new ways of thinking. So with the books as well, the fact that he wants to create the library for the other prisoners, he wants to give them knowledge, because knowledge is power. And there's a really interesting scene where when Andy says to the warden that he doesn't want to run his scams anymore, and the warden says, I'll throw you out the sodomites and I'll burn all your books.
I'll pull you out of that one bunk, Hilton, and cast you down with the sodomites. And the library? Gone. Sealed off, brick by brick. We'll have us a little book barbecue in the yard. We'll see the flames for miles. We'll dance around it like wild Indians.
And that also reminded me of totalitarian regimes where, for example, with Nazi Germany, they had a book burning. And that destruction of those words and stuff, that was a way to, gain control over marginalized people. And so the fact that he tries so hard, writes a letter every week for 6 years to try and get the library to be a better source of knowledge for the prisoners is to me an act of resistance. So coming back to my point that the books are a symbol of, the books, the art, the music, they're all a symbol of freedom and all used as a method of resistance.
Oh, definitely. With Andy's arrival at the prison, because we paint him as an innocent person. One of the things I thought was really fascinating with the use of books is that he's technically the only really educated person in the entire prison.
Mr. Stevens has a birth certificate, driver's license, social security number.
You're shitting me.
If they ever trace any of those accounts, they're going to wind up chasing a figment of my imagination.
Well, I'll be damned. Did I say you were good? Shit, you're a Rembrandt.
The funny thing is, on the outside, I was an honest man, straight as an arrow. I had to come to prison to be a crook.
He's an accountant, or he knows about tax law.
So Moresby Prison issued you your gun, but you actually had to pay for it.
Damn right, the holster too.
See, that's tax deductible. You can write that off.
He's teaching Tommy, I think it is.
Yeah, how to read,
and then to eventually get his diploma. But one of the things that fascinates me is that the only other educated person, and I use the term very loosely, is the warden, because the warden is very knowledgeable about the Bible. He quotes it almost every single scene that you see in it. But the fact is that there's two things that the warden is missing, is the fact that he only knows one book. It's the only one he quotes. And he doesn't apply it. He doesn't apply the knowledge. So when Andy comes in... Yeah, he's a hypocrite, right?
Pleased to see you reading this. Any favorite passages?
Watch ye therefore, for ye know not when the master of the house cometh.
Mark 13:35. Always like that one. But I prefer, I'm the light of the world. He that followeth me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have the light of life.
John chapter 8, verse 12.
So he doesn't apply the knowledge that he says that he knows and he has. And that's kind of very, I guess, analogous of how theists see the world, this idea of like, we have this book and so therefore we know the universe, we know all the knowledge that you don't need to, we don't need science or anything like that. And that's just me putting it very lightly. I'm not trying to be a Hitchens or anything, but one of the things that's fascinating about that dichotomy, that juxtaposition between Andy and the warden, is that Andy has the real knowledge, and then he makes a plan about how to undo everything the warden's plans about his criminal activities.
I believe in two things: discipline and the Bible. Here you'll receive both. Put your trust in the Lord. Your ass belongs to me. Welcome to Shawshank. He must have said something.
Also, Warden. Not a word.
Lord, it's a miracle! Man up and vanished like a fart in the wind.
The thing that the warden can't do, unfortunately, because he is, quote unquote, educated in his way, is that he's locked in. He can't change. There's no way he can ever change. And so when we get to the end, the only other, I guess, redemption for the warden is his own suicide, his own death. There is no other path for the warden other than his own prison, because he knows how he treats prisoners. And I think that's one of the reasons why the fact that non-believers made the film and they use Christian symbology is to show the hypocrisy of it. Because in the quote that I was talking about earlier is when, when we're talking about Brooks, they tell him what he can and can't do, everything in this structure, social network, protection from the outside. He is trapped. And like anyone who only knows that one book, which is what the warden has, you only know this one world, you are trapped. There's no other escape, I think. And that beautiful symbology of the fact that the warden, when he dies, the window breaks, this whole idea of that's the warden's freedom, that he has to kill himself to be free of the the prison because there's no other way for him to get out.
Right. Just to add on to the aspects of library and the books and symbols there, I read a little article by a guy called Jeff Little. It's and he talks about like the significance of the library and what it means, and you know, he states that basically the library is a symbol for intellectual freedom, and it gives the prisoners like a sense of normalcy. It's a place where they can escape from typical prison life, right? Like as you mentioned before, like Tommy and how he sort of, you know, comes to the library to, you know, get a graduation certificate and you know, escape the cycle of crime and sort of make something of himself, and it's a tool of freedom. And another aspect that I thought was interesting was that they sort of use the library as an escape from the prison, and it's sort of I guess through knowledge and through stories. So when you go to a library, you've got both, you know, non-fiction and fiction, and stories and knowledge both help you escape your entrapment. And I think that's an interesting part, because that's an interesting idea, because essentially the Shawshank Redemption film is allowing us to reconsider why we need stories and why we need books and why we need knowledge to, you know, it's actually a tool of freedom, like sort of what you were saying about the Nazi book burning. Yeah. You know, no one can control you, your intellectual freedom, your emotional freedom.
Yeah. And I think there's a real, there's attempts from the prisoners to reform and to educate themselves, and then they're all extinguished by the guards. So we learn about Tommy, how he says, I've been in and out of jail since I was 13. So that in itself is evidence that prison doesn't properly rehabilitate people. And then when Red says he had a wife and a kid and something lit a fire under the boy's ass, and he wanted to get his diploma, and then and then we learn that he gets a C average, and there's some hope for him, but yet at the end of his time on screen, when he is shot and he is murdered, interestingly enough, the warden knocks a cigarette out of his hand and steps on it, so he's extinguishing the fire. It's like any attempt at like resistance through educating yourself is like thwarted. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like analogous of the prison system. The idea of, no, once you're in, we're not going to let you out. Like you are trapped, and the fact that, you know, books, strangely enough, is the real gateway out. It's the real path for Tommy, and the fact that he keeps going back in and out. The moment that he actually has a true path out and he's going to stay out, then that's when the warden, truly does extinguish that fire.
And I think Norton's response to Andy when he asks for funds for the library, he says, there's only 3 ways to spend the taxpayers' hard-earned when it comes to prison: more walls, more bars, more guards. And so this idea that the outside, it's not just the security guards that want to extinguish their attempt, it's also like society, in a way, want them to be condemned and want them to be further oppressed.